What's one mistake you see by candidates?
They miss the opportunity to sell themselves or showcase themselves when it comes to the tell me about yourself question. I know, like, from my own experience, if somebody says something that's like ear catching, shall we say, like, I'll jump on that.
Nice. So let's go back a couple of steps then. Once you've gone through the recruiter screen, what should I be doing to prepare for that kind of first showcase with the hiring manager?
We're not going to be asking you 6 or 7 different questions here. A very kind of general question would be like, can you tell me about a project that you struggled with in the past? So start off with giving us the whole situation, then what was your job here, what type of challenges you were then facing, and then the end result. And last but not least,
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Open to Work podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Parker, and I'm joined this week by Chris Redmond for another episode of our Candidate Journeys series. So Chris, welcome to the Open to Work podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Matt. Excited to be here.
So Chris joins us from Abstraction Games, and this is going to be a really interesting episode, quite different, I think, from some of the other episodes that we've recorded to date, given the kind of niche industry that Chris works in. But Chris, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit, and then we can go into Abstraction and what you do there.
Sure thing. I've been working in recruitment for 12, almost 13 years at this point. Started off an agency, worked in big tech, and then got into the startup world about 5-6 years ago. But again, in tech, I moved into gaming, almost 2 years ago now. So it feels a lot longer, but it's been a really, really exciting journey. And I think I've learned a huge amount just shifting and moving between different industries. And, gaming's definitely been one of the most fascinating ones for sure.
Yeah, and so tell us a little bit about Abstraction Games then, because I think people won't necessarily know Abstraction, but they might know what you've been working on.
Yeah, for sure. So Abstraction, we are a co-development studio. We've been around for about 17 years at this point. So we're not necessarily a startup, but we've been a smaller company for quite a long time, and only in the last 5-6 years have we really kind of grown and gotten to a point where people are getting to know us a little bit more. Essentially, what we're a co-development studio. So we assist other studios on a lot of their technical or creative projects. Okay, so it can be anything from a small part of one of the PC or console games to potentially giving us a lot of autonomy and freedom to really go in and potentially create new levels or characters or things like that as well. So super interesting creative environment and place to be as well.
Yeah, so I guess just to kind of reframe that, so you're sort of like a third party business that will come in to like beef up the delivery of a game that's
Correct.
going to be released that we might know and love and be playing today.
Exactly. So we focus on the B2B side of things, working very closely with a lot of other studios. I suppose some of the previous games that we have worked on are, Halo, Mass Effect, Dune Awakenings is one of the more recent games, and Baldur's Gate 3, which obviously was a huge game last year as well. So, we've been involved in some of the bigger ones. We're getting, I suppose, we're building towards being one of those AAA partners, shall we say, and that's, I suppose, a really exciting journey to be on.
Yeah, and hopefully, if you are listening to this, you probably have like an element of kind of interest in the gaming industry. But the names that you've just listed out there are games that I play a little bit of games, and I've played all of those games. So they are like kind of some of the biggest games out there. So it's really, really exciting to get to be part of that like massive industry.
Yeah, for sure, and we've worked on hundreds of games, but of course, they're some of the bigger ones that we've had a part in.
And so, So tell us a bit more about like kind of Abstraction then as a business. It sounds like quite a unique place to work.
Yeah, so I suppose at the very start of Abstraction, the focus was really on the technical side of things. So going in and helping studios port a lot of their games. What I mean by that is if a game is, let's say, on a PC and they want to move it over to console, so they want to put it on the Xbox or the PlayStation, then we'd be very much brought in to be specialists in helping them migrate that into onto, let's say, the PC, or onto the PlayStation, or the Xbox. In the last 6 years or so, we've really tried to expand ourselves and move into more creative areas and environments. So we've added a new design team, an art team, production team. We've grown the studio now. We're currently at about 100 employees. So, we want to eventually move to a place where we're going to be working on full cycle development. So that essentially means that we are involved in all aspects of the creative side of things in order to enhance and help potentially build
Mhm.
build certain games.
Yeah. And so, why would someone want to join Avalanche versus kind of a AAA studio like EA or DICE, or I think they're the same studio now, but like EA or Blizzard or
Um, so you're talking about abstraction?
yeah.
Yeah. So I suppose one of the biggest things is the opportunity to work on multiple different projects. Okay, so
Mhm.
obviously, if you go into an EA, or a Ubisoft or Riot or something like that, there's a very good chance you're going to be on a game for 3, 4, potentially even 5 years, because it's AAA. It's obviously really exciting to be involved in that, but the opportunity to work with us is, you get to see the insides of all of these guys, and you get to see what goes on within these projects. And then you might move on after a year, 2 years of having seen that. And I think you take a huge amount of learnings from a lot of what you've been
Mhm.
involved with, and you get to see a bit of a variety. So,
Mhm.
of course, on these AAA games, all of them now are using either customized engines or Unreal Engine, which is, yeah, I suppose, what makes things super high def, and looks almost real, shall we say? But um, there's so much more complexity that goes on behind the scenes there, and I think that's the interesting part, the exciting part, as to why you'd join a company like us, is
Mm.
to really see that.
Yeah, it feels very similar to like why you would join like a consultancy, right? Like you like the variety, you like being able to see how lots of different businesses work. That's kind of particularly energizing for you, especially at like particular parts in your career. From my personal experience, I like loved working in agency, and I love working through that kind of period of being able to see how lots of businesses got built their companies and hired. But then that was great for a certain time of my life, and now I like going on the end to end journey. So I imagine that's really part of like your hiring strategy as well.
For sure. I think one of the things to also note is, we're dealing with AAA, or some of the biggest studios in the world, right? So the expectation that they have for us to come in and do a good job is super, super high. So, a lot of our staff are very senior.
Mm.
You are going to come in and actually learn a huge amount from a lot of your colleagues as well, because, you know, that's the expectation. That's kind of that's what our clients need, and that's what our clients expect from us as well.
Yeah. What are the sort of roles that you would hire for then?
So, if we go into kind of engineering, so we've got like four key development departments, which is engineering, art, design, and production. And within engineering, we look for mainly gameplay programmers and also engine programmers. Okay, mostly at a higher mid-level slash senior level. Moving more to, we also have, graphics programmers, a build engineer, of course, as well. So we've got a few other kind of smaller roles within engineering, but they're the core ones: gameplay and engine. And then if we talk about kind of art, we've got technical artists, we've got 3D artists. We don't have a huge art team at the moment. We do use, potentially, if there's a lot of art on a project that we've been asked to come in and work on, we will also work with an outsourced art agency, shall we say, as well. And then on the design team, we've got level designers. We've hired quite a lot of level designers more recently, game designers, system designers, and then production are. We've got a team of about 4 or 5 producers. Okay, and producers are the guys that keep everything together. They're the glue that
Yeah.
they know how to speak to each different function. They know how to communicate clearly with all of them. So they're a really key part
Mhm.
to keeping everything together.
Awesome. And Well, because I think if we have any regular listeners to this podcast,
Sure.
I think a lot of the folks that we would have spoken to are like slightly more corporate. We've even done like high volume with like some John Lewis, but it sounds like all of the roles you're doing are technical in that it feels unlikely that you're going to put a job ad out there and get you'll get a volume of responses, but not necessarily a volume of relevant quality responses that you're going to have to go with. So how does that change your recruiting strategy?
Yeah, it changes it quite a bit, to be honest. It means that we need to be outsourcing a lot more. It also, makes us explore different avenues, of course, as well. So the likes of, Slack communities or Discord communities that we potentially can weasel our way into a little bit, right? But a lot of these people are also on LinkedIn. It's not like they're not, but they're not as active. Maybe they don't have their LinkedIn's up to date, so you may not notice them as much. So there's ways for it kind of it's the core of what we want to be within the company, which is creative. Okay, we need to be creative in our sourcing strategy and how we approach people and how we find people, of course, as well. So yeah, we need to look at more technical avenues there as well.
So you mentioned LinkedIn, obviously, which is kind of the standard headhunting route, and but you mentioned some other kind of interesting channels, and like, do you kind of explore things like GitHub as well to find candidates, or what's your like core channels that someone could be reaching out, like you could be reaching out to people on?
Yeah, I would say like we wouldn't use GitHub as a function for us to reach out to candidates,
Hmm.
but we would definitely use it to assess, let's say, their abilities, right? So most most programmers will have a GitHub if they've especially been working at more of a senior level. So you can, I'm of course not technical enough to be able to say that this person's a super strong candidate or not, but I will work with the hiring manager and some of our senior programmers to make sure that we actually do have, um, I suppose, more of an idea of their actual technical ability there as well.
Hmm. Okay, so I guess to round this out, then, what percentage of candidates, and it doesn't have to be specific, but like broadly speaking, do you approach versus come to you?
I recently looked at our data on this. I think if we're talking about candidates that we specifically interview, I'd say we approach close to 80% of
Yeah.
those candidates.
Okay.
And yeah, I think most of our hires from this year, I would say, are almost higher than that. So
Okay.
85%.
So Alderson James are one of the leading people and talent agencies. Since 2013, they've been responsible for over 1,000 people and talent hires, including one in a company that I used to work at. They helped me hire my head of technology TA. So I know the guys there pretty well. They've been responsible for scaling some of the most innovative companies in the UK and the EU. Also recently just launched in the US. So even folks in your neck of the woods now, James, can get involved for contingent, retained, and executive search. And they also now do embedded through AJX. So they can do it all. And so what does a profile have to look like for you to want to reach out to them? I know that will vary wildly by specific role type, but broadly
For sure.
speaking, what do you look out for, and what consistencies are there?
Yeah. So again, I think it's tricky to just nail it down, right? But I'll talk about, let's say, just engineering. Okay, let's say we have a programmer, or we're looking for a game player engine programmer. Okay, the key things that we really want to see is someone that, first of all, has got quite a lot of experience working on different games. Okay, we don't necessarily need someone that's worked on, let's say, just one game in a big studio. That's good, don't get me wrong, but having a bit of a variety and having the ability to work on different games is really, really important for us. So flexibility within their own environments is really important, and for their LinkedIn profiles, being able to showcase their skills, right? So if a candidate just has programmer or senior programmer, it doesn't give us any substance as to what that actually is. So we want to know what engine you've been working on. We want to know, what languages you've actually been using as well. If you talk about design, it's completely different, right? Designers, we look at LinkedIn profiles, they're great, but we actually really focus on the portfolios. So if I can give anybody in the design world some advice, is get your portfolio up to date. Make sure that you have that on your LinkedIn, that it's visible, so that recruiters can see it and find you, and try and showcase it as much as possible as well.
Yeah, super useful advice. I think being active in updating and being clear with your public presence is just part of the game at the moment, right? If you are looking for your next opportunity, or even it's sort of something that you're thinking about 6 to 9 months away. It's actually never a bad time to just spend a kind of a Saturday morning with a cup of coffee, going through and just making sure that your public presence is up to date. And then that's not necessarily saying you have to post every day and be like a content creator and get a top voice badge or whatever it is.
No, no,
It's
no.
just making sure that if someone comes to you, there's enough information there for them to be able to make an informed decision about whether or not you're right for them. And that is like a kind of every month people should be updating that sort of content on their LinkedIn page.
Yeah, and it's also the details that should be in it. Okay, I think it's fine putting a portfolio together is great initially, but the longer you have that, the more you're updating it, the more detail you're going to add to it. So spend the time doing it, right? Spend a good bit of time putting it together first, and then it's slight reiterations. Every time you've completed a project, add it to your portfolio, add additional things. From our side, it's like we don't want to see the final character, the final level. We want to see, the drawings of what you initially did and how you got from there to there, right? So it's those types of details that will grab our attention.
And so you found the person, they've grabbed your attention. So what does the kind of general like high level process look like?
Yeah. So process would be an initial recruiter screen, first of all. So again, it differs depending on whether someone's applied and someone that we've reached out to. Okay, if we have if we've reached out, we've obviously noticed that they have at least the foundations of what we're looking for. So this call will be much more of a selling call from our side. Okay, so be giving you more information about abstraction, a little bit more about the actual projects that we have previously worked on. I can tell you that in gaming, everything is under NDA, so we will not be able to disclose what project you will be actually
Mm,
working on, which can be quite difficult for people to really grasp. What they're actually going to be moving into. Now, after the recruiter screen, you will sign an NDA with us, so the hiring manager will go into a little bit more detail in regards to the actual work that you'll be doing. But we still have one or two projects where it's under NDA so much that we're not actually, like, there's people that are within the studio that are not working on the game that do not know what that group are actually working on. So it can be very tight in that regard, and can be quite tricky to really
mm,
grab and grab a hook, I suppose, from for people. But people not in gaming that are potentially listening to this probably think that's wild. This is quite common in the industry. So, I think the fact that we have worked on these bigger games, the Mass Effect, Halo, Dune Awakenings, etc., that gives people more confidence and trust that, okay, these guys have worked on games. So we're selling the studio more than
mm.
exactly what they're working on there.
Yeah, it's like, we've done this in the past. We can't tell you what we're working on right now, but based on what we've worked on in the past, you can assume it's probably quite interesting.
Yeah, like we can say this is with a AAA studio, right? We can
Yeah.
say the bare minimum stuff, right? You'll be working with potentially Unreal Engine, right? Because there's so many companies out there doing it. But
Funny.
actually getting into the core of it is just not possible, really,
Makes your
especially
life
in the
very
first.
interesting.
It really does, and we again selling the company and selling a position or a project to a candidate can be very challenging from our side. We need to really sit down and look at what are the key selling points that we can actually talk about. It's one of the first things we do when we open a role is like, right, so what can we actually talk about when we're selling this role to the candidates? And
Hmm.
yeah, again, we have to lean heavily on what we've previously worked on, but there's certain games that we can be a little bit more transparent, and there's
Yeah.
others that we can't.
And so it sounds like you're saying that that when you are talking this through with lots of candidates who, especially from the industry, they sort of get it, and it's not necessarily a reason that they would
Yes.
withdraw from the process because they understand how the game is played a little bit.
Yeah, again, we're going after quite senior people, right? So I think with that in mind, we don't need to explain ourselves too much. I think every interview that they go into, they need to be signing an NDA. So it's very common within the industry.
Okay, so they've done the recruiter screen.
Yes.
At a really high level, so what is it that you're generally speaking going to be hitting on in that recruiter screen with them?
Yeah, we're gonna verify a little bit of your experience, but I'll be honest, like I'd say 60-70% of that call is going to be about us and why we're an interesting place to potentially consider. Okay, I think it's different if you're an applied candidate. We'll go into your motivations, etc. But initially, we want to actually grab your attention. Like we're not going to ask you why you motivated to join us if we've reached out to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's important for us to really grab that hook and pull you in a little bit with what we actually have. And then at that point, after that, we will, if you're still interested and excited, we will send you a recruitment guide. Okay. And this guide is a much more detailed breakdown of the process, about abstraction, how we got from point A to point B. We've also gamified the whole thing. So, our level one is the recruiter screen. Level two is, your team quest and things like that. So, it's a bit of fun, and it also kind of showcases a bit about who we are, and we're not a corporate environment. We're quite informal. We're a fun place to be and a fun place to work, and we want that to be showcased, I suppose, in that.
Yeah, so take me through the levels all the way through to the final boss battle of abstractions interview process.
Yeah, so the first level is, of course, just I suppose, the introduction, right? So we've got um, the initial call, which is an opportunity for you to just get to know who we are, I suppose, first of all, and kind of really ask any questions that you might have at that point as well. And then I suppose we've got the level two, which we call the showcase. Okay, so the showcase is essentially your hiring manager screen. Okay, so that's where you're going to be able to showcase your skills. Okay, you go into more detail about what you've previously done. You also, are going to talk about your experience and some of the projects you've previously worked on, etc. And I think the key things within this is very much to be as authentic as possible. Um, bring success stories that you've got there as well, and I think for any interview, just be prepared. Okay, I think for this interview especially, it's really really important to just have details and have depth to a lot of the examples that you do provide. So.
Mhm.
Um, if you do manage to pass the showcase, then you'll be put mainly into a technical challenge. Okay, so the technical challenge again is to really dive into the technical aspect depending on your role. But if it's on the design side or the art side, we will give you a potential presentation that we ask you to go off and design something and then present it to our team. On the engineering side, it's much more of a technical interview. Okay, we don't send out a technical assessment. We have two of our programmers doing an actual technical interview with you. So they will ask you about certain problems that you've previously faced, but they're much more concerned about, can you figure out a way to find a solution to this technical problem that we've provided for you. Okay, so that's really showcasing again the core technical skills, and at that point, then we would move on to the team interview. Okay, so
What's
the
that level called?
the team interview,
Yeah,
the team quest is
team
what it's
quest. Okay.
called. Yes. So the team quest is an opportunity, we say, to forge alliances. Okay, to really look at how you'll get on with your team, how you'll connect with them. It's important to come with questions to this interview about, the team that you're going to be working with, and the people you'll be working with, of course, as well. How do they work? How do they communicate with each other? Really, really important. I think we talk about skill selection, which is, really understanding what type of skills you are going to actually add to the team, of course, as well, and focus on connection there as well. And yes, the last stage is the final boss, which is it's not for every single interview, of course, but for more senior roles, we do have an interview with one of our leadership. One of our CEO or our COO or something like that, where they get an opportunity to, again, this is much more about understanding the connection with the company. It's really, really important that we get people on board that are aligned with our values, that really understand the culture of the company, and that we feel can add something to that as well. Mm-hmm. So that final interview is really important for us to do that. But if we don't have that last interview, the recruiter also covers quite a bit of this in the first interview. The hiring manager also is assessing, the cultural and team fit, shall we say, there as well.
We are delighted to be sponsored by MetaView. MetaView is the AI assistant for the interview process. Their AI records and transcribes hiring conversations like interviews, intakes, and debriefs, and then provides a perfectly summarized note of everything that was discussed. That means that you can focus on creating human connections with candidates during calls and save time on the busy work of cleaning up notes after every interview. I've spoken to so many recruiters and recruiting leaders who are loving using MetaView across their organizations. It's saving them time, but it also means that they have more data to make better decisions. So for every candidate and every pipeline, hiring teams can now make confident and informed decisions, and recruiters can finally take control of the interview process. The impact on candidate experience is also massive. Since recruiters don't have to worry about taking notes in the moment, they can really focus on being present and engaged with you. Forward-thinking recruiters at high-performing organizations like Brex, HelloFresh, and Quora are all leveling up their interviews with MetaView. So head on over to metaview.ai/open to work to get started for free on your first 5 calls. Nice. So let's go back a couple of steps then. So
sure.
Once you've gone through the recruiter screen, what's the kind of best what should I be doing to prepare for that kind of first showcase with the hiring manager?
Yeah. So the core things I would always suggest is to do your research first of all on us. If the recruiter hasn't given you enough information, which I hope they will have, and also the recruitment guide, you've got plenty of information there. Okay, make sure you just look at it. Make sure you've got a good background of the company. Some of the games we previously worked on, but the next thing I'd recommend is having examples that you can go into a lot of depth with. Okay, so we're not going to be asking you 6 or 7 different questions here. Okay, this is going to be much more focused on 2, maybe 3 questions max, based on the type of work that you're doing. A very kind of general question would be like, can you tell me about a project that you struggled with in the past? Okay, so from that side, we want you to provide an initial overview. Okay, so start off with giving us the whole situation, then diving into what was actually needed to be done. What was your job here? Like, what did you do? What did the team have to do, or what type of challenges you were then facing? And then the end result, right? So focus on the end result, and last but not least, always mention the learnings. Always mention what you learned from that experience. We don't mind if it's been a failed project, but the core thing for us is making sure we've got people that actually have learned from the what's happened, and is able to bring that with them.
Yeah, so this is kind of a classic kind of behavioral interview interaction, right? There's a tell me about a time when,
Yes.
and then you are using the kind of STAR format to
Correct.
deliver that answer, right? So situation, task, action, result, reflection.
Correct. Yes.
And it's I kind of I think sometimes we think software engineering or like highly technical roles, they kind of have a whole new different way that they interview, but really it comes down to the same like core principles, right? You need to be able to tell a story
Yes.
about the impact that you had on a business,
Yeah.
and that's the same whether you're a software developer, a video games designer, a recruiter, a salesperson, a marketer. It's all about that story arc of that, how you were able to deliver an impact to a company.
Yeah, completely. I think star, a lot of people think is like outdated and overused. I'll be honest, it's still a method that I really enjoy when people come to an interview and actually follow that,
Mm,
especially if we give them the platform to do so. The star methodology doesn't work for every single question that you're asked in an interview, but those behavioral based questions, examples of times where you had to do such and such, or um, uh, you know, the challenges that you face, like it's a perfect way to actually just structure and tell your story is what exactly what you said. You could say that it's more of a story. You want to create a short story as well. So
yeah, and I think just for what it's worth, ChatGPT can really help with this. I not write your story, but it can help you understand what sort of questions you're going to need to write about and
yeah,
how to structure that story, right? And so like before an interview, I often would recommend, go in, put the job description to ChatGPT or something like that, and say, hey, give me 10 behavioral interview questions that they could ask in this interview with this profile of
yes,
person, and often it gives you five at least that are going to be pretty spot on.
yeah.
That will at least help you prepare and get in the mindset, and then you can practice how you would respond to those questions live. And it's really worthwhile doing a practice and writing down some of these stories so they're fresh in your mind.
Yeah, we're not there to trick anybody, right? And I think it's important that candidates know that we want you to succeed when you come into the interview, and just being prepared is probably the most important thing for any of these interviews. Is And use ChatGPT for the prep.
Mm.
Obviously, not for all of the answers per se, but
Yeah,
like
definitely.
from a structural perspective, I think it's really really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think to go back onto your question, the that's probably the core thing that I would say is one of the most important things to be prepared for there. But the last thing is curiosity and questions. Okay, again, you can potentially um, you can use ChatGPT for this, but I would say like if you can come up with your own original questions, that does
Definitely.
separate you from the rest.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think you need to picture yourself in the position to really kind of say, okay, if I was in the role, what do I need to be successful here? Or what are the things that I would be looking for in order to make sure that we can, achieve the goal that we've set out for ourselves, right? So then, um, asking questions that actually get you those types of answers are really, really valuable
Yeah.
for you, and also really shows that we like this person's really thought about
Yeah.
being in this role before.
One of the consistencies across all of these podcast series has been the impact of arts asking good questions and how
For
it can really
sure.
separate you from the crowd. A good question shows that you've tried to understand the business, that you're deeply looking to understand the business, and you're looking to almost do like a genuine discovery, so that you can have impact and ask better questions. And these sort of things beget each other, and it's such an important trait that in hiring managers want to see that curiosity. They want to know that you're going to come in and ask questions, and it more often than not will pay back dividends coming up with good, unique, and impactful questions.
Yeah, completely. It's the one thing that, in my eyes, separates candidates. So, I think if you're talking about like what are some of the biggest things that I remember from interviews, it's always the questions that the candidates bring to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not their experience. It's not one or two of these huge achievements they've had, but it's actually what's impressed me is their attitude
Yeah,
and those questions.
I totally agree. I've often been swayed on a candidate by the questions that they asked, and I remember what kind of a job that came to mind. I was interviewing for like I was interviewing someone for a really senior um, leadership role, and I thought on paper their profile was kind of only okay, but the rigor of questions that they asked me was so extraordinarily good and commercial and impactful, they ended up proceeding them to the next stage, and they ended up getting the job. But on paper they weren't like necessarily like spot on what I was looking for, but just the
Yeah.
types of questions they asked represented such a deep commercial understanding and desire to understand commercially how our business worked, and as a result how they could impact that business, that it really stood out. And fair play to them, they ended up delivering really well throughout the rest of the interview. So it does really make a difference. Like, I can't understate that.
Yeah.
Just to move on, so the technical assessments then sounds like they're that for kind of the software developers, it's kind of observing them doing a programming exercise and like having a conversation with them as they're going through kind of almost like a paired programming exercise. Is
Yes.
that right?
It's like a problem solving type of interview. Okay. So we're not giving you even an assignment during the interview. We're actually
Mm-hmm.
going to be talking to you
Okay.
about a technical challenge that we have or that we've previously faced. And we want you to, you know, tell us how you'd potentially work around that, or kind of find a solution to it. So, and we've got two programmers in the technical interview. And again, I would say if you have questions, right, don't be afraid to ask questions during this interview. It doesn't mean that you don't know what you're actually doing or what you're looking for, but it actually shows that you're trying to get more context of,
Mm-hmm.
to give the best possible answer. So I think a lot of people get a little concerned sometimes, or worried that they might come across as not really knowing the answers to the question, when in fact we actually like to see that. We like to see that people are um, looking for more information in order to make a calculated decision
Mm-hmm.
based off of that.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, yeah, exactly. You want to, if you don't fully understand the problem, or the problem hasn't like kind of fully revealed itself, how are you expected to be able to solve the problem? And actually, part of how you solve problems is the questions you ask. Going back to
Yes.
that kind of point we were just making. So I think it's, candidates do often feel nervous, understandably, about their kind of how they'll come across. And so I think it's an important message, and I'm sure that you kind of support candidates as they go through the process. But it's a really important message to be like, it's okay to ask questions. We need to normalize that and support candidates all around the world in kind of thinking that it's okay to ask questions.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we've given all of our interviewers interview training this year as well. So like most of them are very conscious of this, and we've tried to really uh, show them how to provide a comfortable environment for candidates, right? And
Mm-hmm.
making sure that they have space to ask questions during these
Mm-hmm.
interviews as well.
And then so that's the kind of technical programming one. And then for design, presumably you're not asking them to sketch up something for you. Is it like a portfolio walkthrough?
So it depends. It depends on, yeah, I suppose the role itself. But for the most part, we will ask them to actually put something together. So we will send them an actual task to,
Draw a dragon.
yes, draw a dragon for for this type of, because there's a lot of different types of ways to draw a dragon, right? So so we'd be saying, okay, we want you to draw it in such and such a way, or whatever. And at that point, it's not actually like, obviously the final product is important to see, but it's much more about the process, right? It's
Mhm.
much more about you coming to the interview and actually talking through your thought process of how you got from here to here, or how you kind of overcame certain challenges to get to that place.
Okay. I feel like I could sit here and I kind of go through almost every function of your business and ask you specific questions, because you hire so horizontally across so many different kind of functions that it almost could be an
Yeah.
hour in and of itself. But it sounds like if I was just kind of going to summarize everything that we're kind of hearing through the interview process, it sounds like quite structured, right? So like every single person has been trained. There's a structured interview. You're using behavioral interview questions. So using that kind of
Yes.
style format to prepare is really important. But then actually what I'm hearing as a summary is that you don't it's not about necessarily the answer you give more than how you got there.
Yeah,
Like
for
that
sure.
is the process of thinking is what is really important to abstraction in making a decision about who they hire.
Yeah, because I think ultimately, we work with clients that um, you're going to be working with them every single day, right? This isn't here, we've asked you to do this, now go off and do it. We get integrated with their teams as well. So
Mhm.
it's really important that we understand what they're looking for, but also, are able to work with them on how we get there. Right. So I
Mhm.
think that is probably one of the underlying things that we look for in interviews as well.
Yeah. So, some quick fire questions to finish us off with, then, Chris.
Sure.
What's one mistake you see by candidates?
They miss the opportunity to sell themselves or showcase themselves when it comes to the "tell me about yourself" question.
Hmm. That is a really good one. It's one that we haven't had before as a response to this, but is I always kind of describe it as an open goal to start that confirmation bias.
Yes, yes, it
Um,
is. Opportunity to drop nuggets. It's an opportunity for you to sell yourself. I
yeah.
know, like, from my own experience, if somebody says something that's like, you know, ear catching, shall we say, like, I'll jump
Hmm.
on that. And I
Hmm.
think so many candidates don't really understand the value
Yeah,
of that question.
for sure. When you sort of we think about this in the kind of the gaming context, right? It's if that first level isn't interesting, you're probably not going to play the second and third, and
Exactly.
so you've got to get that first level, like introduce the basics, but also make it like quite exciting and interesting, and that they want to be able to continue, and that is that your pilot, right? Like you need to make that interesting. I also have always said that like this is a confirmation bias is real, and like we train it as much as we can out of individuals, but at scale that's still happening all around the world. And
Hmm.
so let's embrace that as candidates. Again, I wouldn't want to say that abstraction is kind of custom to this, right? But I like generally speaking say that if assuming that confirmation bias is happening, this is an opportunity to buy into that confirmation bias and help use it to work in your favor.
For sure. Like, you know, if you're able to drop nuggets that you worked on, this other really high profile game, or, that you did parts of this, and like that does
Yeah,
catch our interest. And, we're human at the end of the day. It happens, whether
yeah,
it be in the recruiter screen or the hiring manager screen. If you're smart about it, you can dictate a conversation. You can guide where the conversation goes, which leads to your strengths. So,
yeah.
I think that's one that I see a lot of people missing out on.
Fantastic. And I'd love to hear maybe a story about a candidate that really stood out to you, obviously anonymizing their names, etc.
Yeah, I would say I've had one that stands out, and yeah, it was on our production team, and I suppose I was relatively new enough to the industry, but what really grabbed my attention and what really made this person stand out was their questions. Okay, and I think they did not just ask questions about production. They asked questions about our engineering team, how we communicate across the organization. You know, our design team, how do they communicate with the engineering team? I'm like,
Nice.
wow, these are questions that I've never gotten before. But also, they're not just thinking about their core role here. They're thinking about, how are we communicating as an overall organization? How do our engineers interact with our art team and our design team? Like, the interview went on an additional 20 or 30 minutes because of these questions, and that does stand out
Mm.
massively. And I think it just backs up our point that and potentially the point of the podcast over the last while is those questions separate you from the rest.
Yeah.
It's without a doubt an
The
example.
I think I know your answer to your next question, which is coming up, which is what are your top three recommendations for candidates who want to work at Abstraction? But I think I know number one.
uh, yes, you might know number one.
Questions. Ask really good
Absolutely.
questions.
Yes, ask questions, but, like, that means sitting down and thinking about it. It
Mhm.
really does. Like, spending 5 minutes on questions, you'll get questions. Don't get me wrong, but
Are the
spend
good questions.
spend like 30, 40 minutes thinking about you being in that position and what type of questions you might have in order to understand things a little bit more. That's what catches us for
Mm.
sure. Um, the second is to just do your research, right? It's important to be prepared coming to these meetings that or the interviews that you've got what you're looking for, and you're fully prepared, I suppose, on that front as well. And
Mhm.
I think um, yeah, let me see, the last thing I would recommend. Yeah, I think for us it's important be aligned with our culture and our values. And I think showcasing that with throughout your interviews is really, really important, right? So we have one that's called going beyond boundaries. That really, that's not necessarily about us stretching what we already know, but it's about us reinventing ways to solve problems, right?
Hmm.
So um, you know being able to you know think about new ways, and it doesn't necessarily need to be massively groundbreaking, but something that we can all uh, kind of have an impact off, right? And that relates to recruitment, it relates to engineering, it relates to design, like everywhere. So being able to grasp the culture by speaking to the recruiter, but also looking at our website, identifying these things. I think those would be the three core things for candidates from my side.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Chris. That was a really, really interesting episode, and we could have gone on for hours,
For sure.
for sure. So, if I would like to get a job at Abstraction, where do I need to go to check out?
Yes, so you can check out, like, follow us on LinkedIn, of course. You can go to obviously our website, connect with potentially myself or my recruitment team. So just search recruiters within Abstraction. We've got a small team of three, so connect with us. Message us if you've got a creative approach. That's even better. So
Yeah, we
that's
get
what I would
tons of
say.
messages just, "Hey, do you have any jobs going?"
Yeah.
But maybe if you want to stand out, you've got to be creative in the way that they've created their levels.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's important for us as a studio that we keep that at the core.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for coming on. I hope this is helpful to anyone who's either looking to enter the gaming industry or kind of learn a bit about kind of how technical hiring is done in different types of industries as well. And good luck to anyone going through the interview process with Abstraction.
Yeah. Thanks so much for
Um,
having me, Matt. I really appreciate it. It was a great conversation.
No,
Really
my
enjoyed it.
pleasure. And for anyone else, if you have any questions for us or have any follow-ups for Chris, feel free to reach out to me on opentoworkpod@gmail.com. We obviously also have our fantastic community, which is up and running with over 100 members now. So check out opentowork.community to see about what that's about, to get direct access to job search advice for some of the leading coaches in the world. And then lastly, of course, we have episodes coming out Mondays and Wednesdays at the moment. So tune in on Wednesday for our next really exciting episode. Okay, Chris, thanks so much for coming on today. Really enjoyed our conversation, and good luck for the rest of the year at Abstraction.
Thanks so much, Matt. Appreciate it.